Welcome. You're here for a deep dive, and today we're really plunging into the, let's say, complex world of a specific Los Angeles street gang.
That's right. We're focusing on the Black Pea Stones, but specifically the Jungles faction.
Exactly. And our main source here, well, it's the information that's out there on their Wikipedia page. And our mission really is to try and pull out the most, crucial and frankly fascinating bits about this group.
Yeah, like their origins, the territory they claimed, what they
Let's
were
look.
involved in.
Yeah. And how law enforcement responded, which is a big part of this story.
Absolutely. There's some major operations.
Right. And get ready because, well, this story has some unexpected turns. There's a connection to a pretty famous movie.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you mean.
The sheer number of gang members crammed into this tiny area, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And like you said, these huge law enforcement efforts.
So when you start digging into a group like the Black Pea Stones Jungles, you see that there's a whole history there, right?
Yeah.
A context. It's not just a label.
Definitely not just a simple street gang label. There's depth.
Okay, so beginnings. Where do we start?
Well, they emerged back in the 1960s. The place was a neighborhood in Los Angeles called Baldwin Village.
Right. And it's key to understand this group, the Jungles, it's what's called a set.
Yeah, like a specific chapter within the bigger Bloods Gang alliance.
And within the Bloods, they're particularly linked with the Piro Coalition. Is that right?
That's the affiliation, yeah. And the territory itself, Baldwin Village, it had this nickname.
The Jungles. Still gets called that sometimes, apparently, even though the official name is Baldwin Village.
That nickname, the Jungles, it probably tells you something about how people saw the area, maybe the conditions back then.
Yeah, no doubt.
But what's really striking, like you mentioned, is the density.
The sheer number of members.
In an area that's, what, less than a square mile?
Yeah, tiny. And the LAPD estimate back in 2005 was like 700 to 800 members.
Yeah.
In that one spot.
700 to 800. It just shows how deeply rooted they were right there.
And geographically, just to place it for people.
We're talking the west side of central Los Angeles.
Right. It really is hard to picture that many people associated with one group in such a small zone.
Yeah, their presence must have been overwhelming.
So, okay, activities. What does the source tell us they were involved in?
Well, unfortunately, it's the kind of list you often see with gang activity.
Drug trafficking.
Drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, robbery, assault.
And the most serious stuff, too.
Yeah, sadly, murder. The sources also specifically flag, narcotics violations, firearms violations as core things.
And putting them in the bigger LA gang picture.
Yeah.
Bloods affiliation means.
Primary rivalry with the Crips.
Yeah.
That's sort of fundamental to the LA gang landscape for decades.
Decades, yeah. A defining conflict.
But it wasn't just the Crips. What's also noted is this long-running conflict they had with the 18th Street Gang.
Which is a Latino gang, right? Just north of Baldwin Village.
Exactly. So it shows, the dynamics aren't always simple. Not just one single feud.
Right, it's more complex.
Yeah.
These webs of alliances, rivalries, sometimes crossing ethnic lines.
Definitely a more intricate picture, layers upon layers.
So, okay, let's shift to how law enforcement dealt with this. It's clear they were a major focus.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the first big ones we see documented is Operation Stone Cold. This was back in November 2005.
Right, a big joint effort, FBI and LAPD working together.
And they served, 16 federal drug indictments? Arrested at least 18 members?
Yeah, and the scale you mentioned earlier, almost 1,000 law enforcement personnel involved.
Wow. Why so many? What does that signal?
Well, that kind of manpower, it likely shows they felt a need for a really strong, coordinated pushback.
To disrupt things significantly.
Exactly. Disrupt what they saw as a major criminal operation. And the fact the raids weren't just in Baldwin Village.
Right, they went into Hawthorne, Inglewood, too.
Suggests the authorities thought the gang's influence, their reach, went beyond just that core neighborhood.
And what they seized kind of tells the story, too, doesn't it?
Yeah. Crack cocaine, an AR-15, an AK-47, that points to serious activity and the potential for serious violence.
And they used videotaped drug buys in the investigation.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard tactic, but it's effective. Builds solid evidence for court.
And it seems Operation Stone Cold had results. 17 federal, 12 state convictions mentioned.
Yeah, a significant number of convictions came out of it.
But clearly that wasn't the end of the story from law enforcement's view, because in 2006, the LA city attorney, Rocky Delgadillo at the time.
Right, he filed a gang injunction.
Can you explain briefly what that means for anyone who doesn't know?
Sure. A gang injunction is basically a civil court order. It puts restrictions on the behavior of people identified as gang members within a specific area.
Like in this case, it stopped them from gathering together in public.
Exactly. Things like associating with other known members, maybe wearing certain clothes, being out past curfew, stuff like that, within a designated safety zone.
And the justification police gave was pretty stark. They claimed this one gang was responsible for like 1,500 aggravated assaults.
And 28 murders.
Just between 2000 and 2005, that's a lot.
Astounding numbers for one group in that time frame.
What are your thoughts generally on how effective injunctions like these are? It's kind of debated, isn't it?
Hugely debated, yeah. On one side, you have law enforcement saying they're essential tools.
To disrupt the gangs, make neighborhoods safer.
Right. Break up their ability to operate openly, plan things, intimidate people, give residents some breathing room.
But the other side.
The other side, well, civil liberties groups raise big concerns. They worry about unfairly targeting people based just on who they know or where they live, sometimes without solid proof of actual criminal acts.
Guilt by association, essentially.
That's the fear. And then there's a question of long-term impact. Do they actually dismantle the gang? Or just, push the problem somewhere else?
Displacement. Yeah, that makes sense.
So those high numbers the police cited, they paint a picture of a community really struggling. But the legal tool used, the injunction, it's complex, controversial.
Yeah, definitely not a simple solution. So, okay, fast forward a few years, May 2011, another big operation.
Operation Red Dawn.
This followed a year-long investigation, right? FBI and LAPD again.
Yep. And it ended with raids involving over 900 officers and agents across Southwest LA.
And this time, even more indictments. 75 members and associates.
75 state and federal drug charges, primarily.
And the stuff they seized. PCP, meth, quite a bit of marijuana and cocaine, plus guns.
Yeah, significant quantities across the board.
What does an operation like Red Dawn coming years after Stone Cold tell us?
Well, it really highlights the persistence of the issue, doesn't it? And the ongoing commitment from law enforcement to keep targeting this group.
Suggests the problem didn't just go away after the first big push.
Clearly not. And indicting that many people, 75, it suggests a really deep investigation trying to hit the gang's structure, not just street-level stuff.
But then the strategy seemed to shift a bit later, didn't it? The source mentions focusing on property owners.
Ah, right. Particularly at the Chesapeake Apartments.
Which was this big 425-unit complex, described as a longtime stronghold for the Black P Stones.
Exactly. So the LA city attorney, Mike Feuer this time, started using a different tactic.
Nuisance abatement lawsuits and injunctions tied to specific properties.
Yeah, lots of them. The source says 98 lawsuits filed, 96 injunctions secured just between July 2013 and November 2017.
Why go after the landlords or property managers? What's the thinking there?
It's actually pretty strategic. The idea is that gangs often need physical bases, right? Places to hang out, store things, run operations.
Hubs.
Hubs, exactly. So if you put pressure on the property owners, legally,
through these lawsuits and injunctions,
you force them to take action, improve security, evict known gang members involved in crime, cooperate more with police, basically make it harder for the gang to use that property as a safe haven.
You're kind of dismantling their infrastructure.
Precisely. And a big complex like the Chesapeake Apartments, that could have been a really significant base for them.
And did it work? The source mentions LAPD raids in those buildings.
Yeah, and it says this reportedly led to a noticeable drop in crime right in that specific area.
So disrupting their physical space seemed to have a real, tangible effect, at least locally.
It really points to that link between crime and specific places. If you can make a key location hostile territory for a gang, it can definitely disrupt their operations there.
But again, the question remains, does it solve the problem long-term or just move it? That's always the underlying question with these localized strategies. Yeah, important to keep in mind.
Okay, let's pivot a little. This is kind of fascinating. How the Black P Stones, the Jungles, have sort of seeped into popular culture.
Right, it's pretty striking.
Most famously, maybe, the movie Training Day from 2001.
Classic film. Very gritty.
Well, it was actually filmed in Baldwin Village, in the jungles.
Yeah, use the actual location. And even more directly, Clee Shahid Sloan, whose sources say was linked to another gang, Athens Park. He was involved in making the movie.
Wow. Okay.
What does it mean when these, real-world tough environments and even people connected to them become part of Hollywood entertainment?
That's a deep question. It definitely blurs lines, between reality and fiction.
Using the real place gives it authenticity, I guess.
It does, but it also runs the risk of, well, either romanticizing or maybe just sensationalizing a really serious, often violent situation.
And having someone involved who has real ties.
Adds another layer, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it helps make it more real, more nuanced. Or maybe it influences the portrayal in ways we don't even realize, raises questions about the message.
It's a reminder that these screen stories often come from real communities, real lives.
Very real lived experiences, yeah.
And Training Day wasn't the only one. They apparently showed up in the film Baby Boy 2, same year, 2001.
Okay.
And on TV, shows like Southland.
I remember that show.
Season 2, Episode 1. And another show, gang-related, Season 1, Episode 12.
So they've been depicted multiple times.
Yeah, and even in a music video, Walk a Flock of Flame, Hard into Paint.
Huh. Okay.
It seems like this particular group, or at least the name and the imagery around them,
Yeah.
it's become part of the wider public knowledge somehow. For better or worse.
Yeah, these media appearances, even if they're small roles or just background, they shape the story, the narrative around the Black Pea Stones jungles.
Can reinforce stereotypes, maybe.
Yeah.
Or create a certain kind of
Yeah.
mystique.
Could be either or both. It really makes you think about the responsibility of creators when they're dealing with real life stuff like gang violence. What's the impact?
On the communities themselves and on the audience watching. Yeah.
Definitely.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what are the main takeaways as someone who wants to understand the Black Pea Stones Jungles story?
Well, I think first is just the long, concentrated history of this group in one specific, pretty small area.
Baldwin Village, the jungle.
Right. It speaks volumes about, the social factors, economic factors maybe, that allow gangs to form and stick around.
And then the scale of the crime associated with them.
Yeah, the serious criminal activity. And tied to that, the sheer scale of the law enforcement response over the years.
These massive repeated operations, Operation Stone Cold, Red Dawn.
It shows what a challenge these groups pose and the huge resources needed to try and combat them.
And finally, this weird intersection with pop culture.
Yeah, how these local realities can bubble up and become part of movies, TV, music, which again makes you think about representation and impact.
Okay, so that leaves us and you, the listener, with something to chew on, maybe.
A final thought.
What is the history of a specific localized gang like this one?
Mm-hmm.
What does it tell us about bigger picture stuff?
Like issues of community, crime, poverty maybe, law enforcement strategies in cities?
Yeah. And what does it mean when those really difficult real-life situations become the backdrop or even the subject for our entertainment?
What are the implications of that crossover?
Definitely something to think about long after we finish talking here.